Hi friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. The Hollow News oftentimes bombards us with sensational stories about mass killings of younglings by rogue Force users. While as sad as those events are, in reality, far more people are killed in our galaxy by something as mundane as starships colliding with space whales at FTL speeds. It's one of those hazards in space travel that for some reason people have just accepted as a part of life. Black holes in the Ithorian clap are unavoidable and unstoppable forces of nature. Space whales, on the other hand, can easily be defeated if you know what you're doing. But before we begin today's episode on how to hunt space whales, I'd like to mention that we've almost hit 400,000 subscribers on this channel. Probably hit it within the next few weeks, so I figured it'd be a good time to do a Q&A. It's been roughly a year since we've done our last Q&A, so if you guys have any questions for me or about the channel or about Star Wars, let me know in the comments section below. And if you really want to be heard, you can just message us on Facebook. I hate Facebook. In the early days when humanity had first figured out spaceflight and begun venturing out from the core of the galaxy, pioneers and merchants first encountered the giant purrgils. This is way back in the day, before the Galactic Greenpeace existed and was running around virtue signaling about how they don't eat Ewok meat because they're sentient or something like that, while simultaneously ramming deep space fishing vessels usually run by Jedhan refugees who are just trying to make a little cash on the side by hunting purrgils for their meat and oil. This was back when there weren't even hyperdrives, and we literally had to put people into carbonite and travel at sub-FTL speeds for centuries to get to another system. It was hard enough for these pioneers to make sure the path they plotted would take them around hazards like black holes or Jeffrey Epstein's Island, but wandering pods of purrgils were more or less impossible to detect, and even if they were detected, with everyone in hibernation, there would be no one to guide the ship to safety. Which is why most spacers and starship captains started firing purrgils on sight. As a matter of fact, that was one of the biggest reasons why civilian ships started arming themselves in the first place. But soon, purrgil hunting parties became more common and more professional as shipping companies started giving out bounties for dead purrgils. During this golden age of purrgil hunting, the space whales numbers were almost brought under control, and by control I mean extinction. But of course, as hardworking men and women pioneered new hyperspace lanes and seeded life across the galaxy, people living in the comforts of super-developed core world planets began seeing this practice as very barbaric and cruel. They, of course, had never seen a transport ship full of orphans explode after colliding with a purrgil in hyperspace. So what exactly are purrgils? Well, they definitely look like aquatic mammals that we can find here on Earth, but instead of having tails, these monsters had squid-like tentacles that helped propel them through vacuum. The purrgils breathed in cosmic gas in order to survive and somehow can also travel in hyperspace. No one really understands exactly how they were able to do this, and it leads me to suspect that they might be genetically engineered weapons used by some ancient species like the Rakatan to seed hyperspace lanes with essentially moving landmines. It was extremely hard to bring down a purrgil because their skin was made of some extremely tough material that was terrific at energy absorption. An adaptation that really helps them survive in space where there's tons of background radiation and cosmic rays. A full-grown purrgil could withstand multiple laser cannon shots without so much as flinching. But the whale hunters of old figured out that the purrgils did have a weakness. While their skin was very protective against energy weapons, it was still vulnerable to piercing weapons, and so large harpoons and spears could be shot into their skin. This was a similar tactic to what whalers of old did as they sailed the seas of water planets and protected shipping lanes from gigantic aquatic monsters. A common tactic used by more creative whalers was to catch a smaller baby purrgil and use that purrgil to lure more purrgils into a purrgil kill zone. But even a purrgil that was pierced by multiple harpoons could be a serious threat to whalers, especially purrgil ultras that could grow as large as a Star Destroyer. Now, some spacers were just interested in getting rid of purrgil as a civil service that would help everyone. They weren't necessarily interested in harvesting meat and oil from their bodies. They would use a much safer tactic. Using a transmitter, they would gather large pods of purrgils and then simply guide them into black holes and other gravitational anomalies. Han Solo actually pulled this off accidentally the first time he piloted the Millennium Falcon. While on his record-setting Kessel Run, Han Solo had run into a giant space monster known as the Suma Verminov near the Acades Maelstrom. This gigantic tentacled monster was most likely some kind of messed up long-lost cousin of the purrgil, and just as stupid. Solo launched the Millennium Falcon's escape pod into the Maelstrom, and the giant beast chased it and got caught in its gravity well, which quickly deboned it. Now, we do a great disservice to ourselves and to nature by trying to attribute human characteristics and traits to animals. Early spacers who thought purrgils were guardians guiding them safely through hyperspace lanes oftentimes flew too close to these gargantuan beasts and had their ships destroyed. But the purrgils also weren't evil. They were no more cruel than an avalanche or a supernovaing star or a Death Star firing on a planet full of traitors. The purrgil were just stupid beasts that didn't understand their own strength and occasionally killed humans without even realizing it. While the loss of any life is sad, the life of a human is worth many times more than a non-sentient space whale. The purrgil were just one of many threats lurking in deep space. Life is a tenacious and unrelenting thing, and even in the harsh cold of vacuum, life can thrive. Another beast commonly found in vacuum was the exogorth, or space slug. These were silicon-based creatures that usually lived inside of asteroids. These creatures were asexual and reached sexual maturity at the length of 10 meters, at which point they could split into two, creating 2 more space slugs. Larger variants with body image issues could grow up to almost a kilometer in length. Exogorths mainly fed off of space radiation and also minerals and space debris, along with other silicon-based life forms. For most of their lifetimes, they lay dormant and conserved energy for when they needed to hunt. They would occasionally move from one asteroid to another, floating in vacuum using the stellar winds to propel them. Their mass was so large that even the most basic maneuver took up huge amounts of energy. At one point in time, the House of Adaska were even able to weaponize these giant beasts by genetically altering them to increase their hunger and growth rate. These weaponized space slugs would be equipped with hyperdrives and then sent to an enemy system, where they would begin eating everything in orbit from satellites to space stations. The space slug that Han Solo and the Millennium Falcon ran into in the Hoth system had actually been seeded there by a Mugari pirate who was seeking to protect his hidden base nearby. The best way to destroy an exogorth is to fly around its head at a safe distance, hopefully tiring it out, and then flying within its maw and then planting explosives. Most things are easier to kill from within. An important life lesson that can be applied to almost anything. A toxin known as catrium was also occasionally administered to space slugs as they would prevent their growth. While you're inside the cavernous esophagus of a space slug, you might run into another silicon-based creature known as a Mynock. These bat-like creatures were just small parasites for something as large as a space slug, but for a smaller ship, they could prove to be a huge problem. These creatures love feeding on power cables and energy conductors found on ships, which could quickly destroy the power supply on a vessel. Like the space worms, the Mynocks were able to live in vacuum and reproduce by splitting into two. They were naturally hated by all spacers, and usually any ship that brought Mynocks to port were heavily fined and quarantined. The Rebel Alliance was actually known for breeding these creatures and sending them to Imperial space stations where they would wreak havoc. Mynocks were pretty simple to kill, however. Any type of energy weapon or even stun round would do. Mynocks had an extreme reaction to helium, which could quickly kill them, which is also why they mainly stayed in vacuum. Deep space sports hunters would occasionally use helium grenades to take out multiple groups of Mynocks at one time. Now, the animals that I have mentioned on this list are but just a few of the creatures that can survive in vacuum. There are far more mysterious creatures that are just waiting to be discovered. To any aspiring adventurer or spacer who wishes to journey amongst the stars, remember that even in deep space there is life, and where there is life, there most likely is something that is going to try to absorb your life power in order to sustain itself. While some of these monsters, like the legendary space grazer, are most likely extinct, keeping an open mind to all possibilities is an important part of staying alive in the galaxy. Just ask the miners on parts of Kessel that are exposed to vacuum. The nadir spider could not only live in vacuum, it could also shoot corrosive acid and like killing carbon-based life forms. Many of these silicon-based creatures and other vacuum-living creatures have evolved in a way so different from our own experiences that it's really hard to comprehend what exactly they are. The species of incorporeal humanoids known as starred weirds, they are extremely gaunt and skeletal and had glowing eyes and talons. They would oftentimes approach individuals spacewalking and then use the force to emit a telepathic scream to frighten spacers and then attack them with their claws. It was said that these creatures were attracted to force users and attacked them on sight. They would also occasionally appear on board while a ship was still in the middle of hyperspace, so we have no idea how exactly these creatures work, and whenever someone manages to kill one, their body just kind of disappears. So as you can see, the deep space is a very mysterious and kind of dangerous place. I recommend you guys always shoot first and ask questions later, something that Han Solo did a lot. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, thanks for joining us today. If you're watching this, you are Generation Tech.